The rain hammered against the sidewalk, and she clutched a paper bag so tightly it tore at the seam. Her other hand gripped a stroller handle, knuckles white, breath ragged, as she hurried past strangers who never looked up. Inside the coffee shop, he watched her through the steamed-up glass, sensing her urgency but not yet knowing why. She pushed through the door, the warm scent of espresso wrapping around her like an embrace she didn't have time to feel. Her eyes darted to the counter, scanning the menu she could barely afford. He said, "Cold morning, isn't it?" She nodded, pressing a wet strand of hair behind her ear, glancing down at the stroller where tiny fingers twitched under a blanket. "Just coffee, small." Her voice cracked. His gaze flicked to the child, then to the trembling paper bag with only a heel of bread inside. Without a word, he slid a pastry across the counter. "On the house." She hesitated, suspicion and pride wrestling behind her tired eyes. "I can't." He cut her off gently. "You can." The world outside still roared with rain, but for a moment, the shop became a quiet island. She took the pastry, wrapping it in the napkin like it was something precious. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry, and she whispered, "Almost home." He didn't ask her story. She didn't offer it. But something had shifted between them, something neither of them understood yet. The bell above the door jingled again as she left, the cold rushing back in to fill the space she'd worn. He returned to wiping the counter, but his mind wasn't on the rag in his hand. Outside, she paused under the awning, adjusting the blanket around the baby. The pastry sat in the stroller's cup holder like a promise. He watched her from the corner of his eye, through the rain and glass, wondering why her face lingered in his thoughts. She stepped back into the downpour, disappearing into the gray curtain, swallowed by the city's endless motion. He didn't know it yet, but this was the first moment in years that he'd feel the quiet pull of purpose. The next morning, he arrived early, earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, but the air still held the damp weight of the storm. As he set the pastry tray in place, he found himself glancing at the door more than the clock. Customers trickled in, but not her. Hours passed, and he tried to shake the thought. She had been a stranger. Yet something about her, the way she held that pastry, stayed with him. When the lunch rush came, he smiled at regulars, made their drinks, and let his mind wander back to the woman with the tired eyes. By late afternoon, he almost convinced himself he wouldn't see her again. Then the bell rang, and she stepped in, drier this time, but the same weary posture. No stroller. Just the torn paper bag, folded and tucked under her arm. "Back again," he said, with a half smile. She nodded, eyes scanning the display. "For him," she murmured, placing coins on the counter. They didn't add up to the price of anything there. He slid another pastry forward, and for a second, the corners of her mouth softened into something close to gratitude. She left without lingering, the pastry wrapped tight in napkin again. He watched her cross the street, weaving between cars, her steps quick and deliberate. For reasons he couldn't name, he wanted to follow, not to pry, but to understand where she hurried to. Instead, he stayed behind the counter, hands resting on the wood, watching the door swing shut, the faint echo of the bell fading into the hum of the espresso machine. A week passed before she returned, this time mid-morning, when the shop was quiet enough for every sound to be noticed. She entered without rushing, but her eyes still carried that guarded watchfulness. He was wiping down the espresso machine when he saw her. "Good to see you," he said lightly, not expecting a reply. She offered a small nod, sliding coins across the counter. "Enough for a coffee." He poured it slowly, the sound of the liquid filling the cup louder than it should have been in the silence. She cradled the cup with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers before taking a sip. Well, the baby wasn't with her, and he wondered if that was good or bad news. But he didn't ask. She lingered this time, staring out the window at the street beyond. The quiet between them felt less like distance and more like truce. He caught her glancing toward the pastry case, then away again as if she'd thought better of it. "You can try one," he said, sliding a small plate toward her. She hesitated, then accepted, breaking the pastry in half, and placing one piece on a napkin. "For later," she murmured, as if explaining herself. The corners of his mouth lifted, though he kept his eyes on the counter. There was a fragility in her voice, as though she was unused to anyone offering her more than she could afford. She stayed a few minutes longer, sipping her coffee, taking small bites, her gaze softening as if the warmth of the place was working past her defenses. That afternoon, when the shop was nearly empty, he stepped outside for a moment to clear his head. Across the street he saw her again, this time with the stroller. She was stopped at a corner, speaking to someone he didn't recognize. The man she spoke to leaned in too close, his expression sharp, words quick. She shifted her stance, tightening her grip on the stroller. Something about the scene sent a ripple of unease through him. He almost stepped forward, but the light changed, and she pushed the stroller away, disappearing into the crowd. Back inside, the scent of coffee felt heavier than usual. He kept thinking about the way her shoulders had tensed, the way she had avoided looking at the man's face. He told himself it was none of his business, but the image stayed lodged in his mind. When she next came in, he decided he'd ask her, not directly, but in a way that left her the choice to answer. Until then, he worked with a quiet that was no longer peaceful. 2 days later she returned. The baby was asleep in the stroller, a knit cap pulled low over its head. She ordered coffee again, voice steadier than before. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Just a neighbor," she said, as if that explained the man on the street. He didn't press. But her answer didn't sit right. It was too practiced, too easy. The truth, he suspected, was still out there waiting. The first snow arrived quietly, blanketing the city in white. She stepped into the shop that morning, shaking flakes from her hair, cheeks flushed from the cold. He greeted her with a smile and a steaming cup already waiting. "You'll freeze out there," he said. She accepted it without protest, her gloved hands curling around the paper cup. The stroller sat beside her, wheels crusted with snow, and for a moment, the place felt like shelter in more ways than one. Outside, the snow kept falling, muting the city's noise until all that was left was the soft hum of the espresso machine and the faint sound of her whispering to the child. Over the next weeks, her visits became routine. Some mornings, she stayed long enough for 2 coffees. Other days, she slipped in and out without much more than a nod. But the way she seemed to exhale when she crossed the threshold told him the shop was more than a place to buy drinks. It was somewhere she could set her burdens down, even briefly. He began to notice the smallest changes, her laugh coming easier, her posture less guarded. Trust, it seemed, was a slow build. One quiet afternoon, she lingered after her coffee was gone. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. He paused mid-motion, rag in hand. "Leaving where?" She shrugged, eyes on the window. "Here. This city. Everything in it." He considered it. "Sometimes. But then I think maybe it's not the place. Maybe it's what we bring into it." She gave a faint nod, but her gaze stayed far away, as though she was already somewhere else in her mind. That night, long after closing, he found himself walking the streets. Snow crunched under his boots, the cold biting at his hands. He passed the corner where he'd once seen her with the stranger, and the memory sharpened. A part of him wanted to find her, to make sure she was safe. But he knew better than to cross that line. Some walls, once breached, couldn't be rebuilt. The next day she didn't come. Nor the next. By the 3rd day, he was watching the door more than his work. When she finally appeared, her coat was buttoned wrong, her hair pulled back hastily. The stroller was gone. "Morning," he said softly. She just nodded, ordered coffee, and sat in the corner without looking up. Something had shifted. And this time, he knew it wasn't the weather. She arrived just before closing, the street outside washed in the amber glow of street lamps. Her coat was zipped to her chin, but her hands were bare and trembling. He poured her coffee without asking, setting it gently before her. "Where's the little one?" he asked quietly. She froze, eyes dropping to the cup. "He's with someone." Her voice was thin, stretched. Something inside him tightened. She never left the baby with anyone, not from what he'd seen. He opened his mouth, but she shook her head quickly. "Don't," she whispered, as if more words might shatter her. He noticed the folded paper bag beside her, the same one she'd carried weeks ago. She pushed it toward him. "For you," she said. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, was the same pastry he'd given her that first day, untouched, preserved as though it had been waiting for this moment. "I thought I'd pay you back," she murmured. His throat tightened. It wasn't the pastry that mattered. It was the truth it carried. She had held onto it because she hadn't wanted to forget. The door swung open hard, a gust of cold rushing in. The man from the street corner stepped inside, his eyes scanning until they landed on her. "Time to go," he said flatly. She flinched, coffee sloshing in her cup. The air in the room changed. Thick, electric. "She's not going anywhere," the cafe owner said evenly, stepping forward. The stranger smirked, leaning on the counter. "Not your call." She stood abruptly, clutching the paper bag to her chest. "It's fine," she said quickly, voice shaking. But her eyes told another story, a silent plea. The stranger reached for her arm, and the cafe owner's hand shot out, gripping the counter's edge like it might keep him grounded. "Leave," he said. The stranger's jaw tightened, but after a long beat, he stepped back, muttering something under his breath before disappearing into the night. The door closed, but the air didn't relax. She sank back onto the stool, trembling. "Who was that?" he asked. Her answer came like a fracture, short, sharp. "My husband." He blinked. "You're married?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. At least, I thought I wasn't." And with that, the shape of everything between them changed. She told him the story in fragments. How she'd left in the middle of the night with nothing but the baby and that torn paper bag. How the man had found them twice before, each time promising change, each time worse than before. "I can't keep running forever," she said, eyes fixed on the swirling coffee. He wanted to tell her she could stay, but promises like that were dangerous things. The next day, the stranger returned, this time in daylight. The shop was busier, customers scattered at tables, oblivious to the tension threading through the air. He walked straight to her table, his shadow falling across her. "You're coming with me," he said. The baby stirred in the stroller. The cafe owner stepped between them, voice calm but unyielding. "Not today." The stranger's voice rose, cutting through the cafe's chatter. Customers began to glance over, sensing the fracture in the air. The woman reached for the stroller handle, her knuckles white. The cafe owner's tone dropped low, almost a growl. "Leave before you regret it." The stranger's eyes narrowed, but the weight in the room had shifted. He backed away slowly, the door slamming behind him. When the last customer left, the cafe felt cavernous. She sat at the counter, hands shaking. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Maybe I did." She met his eyes for the first time without the wall between them. "I can't go back," she whispered. He didn't have an answer, but he knew he wouldn't let her face it alone. That night, he locked the cafe and walked her home. The snow had returned, falling in soft sheets that blurred the streetlights. She pushed the stroller slowly, the baby asleep inside. At her door, she hesitated. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, turning to go. But as he walked away, he knew he'd already crossed the line. He was part of her story now, for better or worse. The wind screamed through the narrow stone alleyways, carrying with it the scent of smoke and something metallic. Eric's boots struck the wet cobblestones, each step echoing like a warning bell. He pulled his cloak tighter, eyes scanning every shadow for movement. The city felt different tonight, alive, with a silent malice. Selena's voice cut through the gloom, sharp but shaking. "They're watching us." She wasn't wrong. Eric had caught glints of metal high on the rooftops, quick flashes of steel in the moonlight. They were being herded. Ahead, a crumbling archway loomed, lit by the faint orange glow of distant fire. The ground trembled beneath them, not from footsteps, but from something deeper, something beneath the city itself. Eric's mind raced. Every choice tonight mattered. Every turn could mean salvation or death. He glanced at Selena, saw the fear in her pale face, and forced a steadier voice. Stay close. No matter what happens, don't run. A sudden metallic clang rang out, a gate dropping behind them. Shadows converged. Cloaked figures emerged from the mist, their faces hidden, their movements fluid and purposeful. The leader stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his voice like gravel. You've gone too far, Eric. The truth you seek is not meant to be found. Eric tightened his grip on his blade. Then you shouldn't have buried it in my city. The air grew heavier, the alley narrowing in his mind. Somewhere deep inside he knew, this was only the first move in a far deadlier game. Steel clashed in the narrow alley, each strike sending sparks skittering across the slick stones. Eric moved with controlled fury, his blade finding rhythm against the leader's heavier swings. Selena darted between shadows, loosing arrows that vanished into the mist. The cloaked figures moved unnaturally, their speed almost inhuman, their silence more unsettling than any battle cry. Every time Eric struck, they yielded just enough to keep him off balance. Selena's breath came in ragged bursts. They're stalling us, she cried, loosing another arrow into a shadow that dissolved as it fell. The leader's voice cut through the clangor. You're fighting the wrong enemy. Eric gritted his teeth. Then, point me to the right one. A deep, resonant hum began to build beneath their feet, a sound that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. The air vibrated with it, making the torchlight shiver. Suddenly, the ground cracked open in the center of the alley, a jagged fissure spilling light like molten gold. Eric stumbled back, shielding his eyes. From the light rose a figure, not flesh, not entirely shadow, its form shifting like smoke, eyes burning like coals. The cloaked assailants stepped away, bowing their heads. Eric's voice was barely a whisper. What have you brought here? The figure from the fissure stepped forward, its voice neither male nor female, yet resonating in Eric's chest like a drumbeat. You have touched the chain of fate, now it binds you. Selena's fingers tightened on her bowstring, but she dared not release. The air around the being shimmered, bending light as if reality itself strained to contain it. Eric swallowed hard. If you know me, then you know I don't wear chains well. His defiance drew no reaction, only a slow, deliberate tilt of the figure's head. The fissure widened, spilling more golden light and heat, the sound of distant chanting seeping upward like whispers through stone. The cloaked leader spoke with reverence. The key-bearer has awakened. Your fight is no longer with us. Eric's voice sharpened. And if I refuse? The figure's eyes flared brighter, the golden light intensifying. Then the chain will drag you into the depths, until the sun forgets your name. Selena stepped closer to Eric, whispering, I don't think this is a choice. For the first time in years, Eric felt small, not from fear of dying, but from the weight of something far greater than himself. The fissure's hum deepened, becoming a pulse that matched Eric's heartbeat. Selena felt it too, her breaths fell into rhythm with the strange cadence. The figure extended a hand, translucent, shifting like liquid glass. Eric hesitated, the weight of unseen eyes pressing on his back. Selena's whisper barely carried. If you touch it, nothing will be the same. Eric met the figure's gaze. Nothing has been the same since the day I picked up this sword. When their hands met, searing heat shot through his arm, not pain exactly, but an overwhelming flood of memory, not his own. He saw cities burning, oceans boiling, mountains splitting. The images shifted, moments of peace, faces smiling, lives saved. The chain of fate wasn't only destruction, it was choice. The figure spoke again. Carry it well, or it will carry you. The fissure began to close, the golden light dimming to embers. The cloaked figures vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of the hum. Selena exhaled, finally lowering her bow. What just happened to you? Eric looked down at his hand, faintly glowing. I think I was chosen. and I'm not sure I wanted to be. By the time they reached the outer gates of the city, dawn's first pale light touched the horizon. Eric's hands still glowed faintly, hidden under his cloak. Selena walked beside him in silence, though her eyes never left the hand that had changed everything. Beyond the gates lay the forest, a sprawling, dark expanse whispering in the wind. Somewhere inside, answers waited. Eric slowed, glancing back once more at the city's skyline, the towers etched in morning mist. He knew they might never return. Selena finally spoke. Whatever this is, we face it together. A flock of crows burst from the tree line, their cries sharp against the quiet dawn. Eric tightened his grip on his sword hilt. The path ahead was uncertain, but the weight in his chest was no longer fear. It was resolve. The chain of fate had found him, and now, step by step, he would follow it to the very end. The forest swallowed them in damp shadow, branches clawing at the morning light. Eric kept his glowing hand hidden, yet the warmth seeped through his cloak, guiding him forward like a heartbeat. Selena's voice was low. You feel it too, don't you? Like the forest knows where we're going. He nodded, scanning the dense canopy. The leaves whispered as if passing messages between themselves. Every step pressed deeper into the unknown. A narrow stream crossed their path, its surface shimmering in unnatural gold where the sunlight touched. Eric knelt, dipping his fingers in the water. It pulsed faintly, echoing the rhythm of the chain within him. Selena crouched beside him. It's the same light from the fissure. He met her eyes. It's everywhere now. I think it's waking the land. They moved on, the air thickening with the scent of pine and damp earth. Birds watched silently from high branches, their heads tilting as the pair passed below. Then, without warning, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in soft sunlight, the grass shimmering like it was brushed with gold dust. Eric paused, heart pounding, not from fear but from the unshakable feeling that they had crossed into something sacred. The clearing was unlike anything Eric had seen. At its center stood a single ancient tree, its bark etched with spiraling symbols that glowed faintly in rhythm with his own pulse. Selena stepped forward slowly, eyes wide. It's alive, really alive. The tree's branches reached toward the sky, each leaf shimmering as though woven from thin sheets of metal. When the wind moved, they rang like distant chimes. Eric approached, each step heavier, the chain inside him tightening. He placed his palm against the bark, and warmth surged through him, memories not of destruction this time, but of creation. He saw rivers foaming, mountains rising, people laughing in sunlit valleys. Selena watched, unable to speak. The air around the tree shimmered, the scent of blossoms filling the clearing. Then the symbols on the bark shifted, forming words he could almost understand. One stood out, etched in brighter gold, return. Eric's throat tightened. It wants something back. Selena glanced at his hand. Maybe it's not just a gift, maybe it's a debt. The ground beneath them trembled, as a low hum filled the clearing, harmonizing with the tree's chime-like whispers. The symbols pulsed faster, matching Eric's quickening heartbeat. Selena stepped closer. If you give it back, what happens to you? Eric's jaw clenched. I don't know. But he understood, part of the chain's power belonged here. He closed his eyes, letting the glow from his hand flow into the tree. At first it resisted, pulling against him, but then it accepted, drawing in the golden light like a deep breath. The warmth left his palm, replaced by an aching emptiness. His knees buckled, but Selena caught him, steadying his weight. The tree's glow intensified, spilling into the grass, the air, the sky itself. Clouds parted, flooding the clearing with pure sunlight. Selena's voice broke. Eric, look. Where once the grass was gold-dusted, now flowers bloomed in every color, spreading outward in a wave of life. The forest sang, birds, wind, and leaves in harmony. When the last of the light faded, Eric's hand no longer glowed. Instead, a faint golden scar traced across his palm, warm to the touch. Selena studied it. It didn't take all of you. Eric managed a tired smile. Maybe it left me what I still need. They stood in the transformed clearing, the air alive with scents of new blossoms and fresh rain. The ancient tree no longer pulsed, but its presence remained, watchful, content. Eric felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted, even as he knew the chain's journey wasn't done. Somewhere, others would call for it, and he would have to answer. Selena glanced toward the forest path. We should go before it changes its mind. He chuckled weakly. Trees don't change their minds. People do. They turned away, stepping into the dappled sunlight filtering through the forest's edge. The path ahead glowed faintly, as if lit by something only they could see. By afternoon, they emerged from the forest onto a ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the river glittered in the sun, winding through fields now dotted with blooms the wind carried from the clearing. Selena stopped, letting the view wash over her. It's beautiful. Eric nodded, though his gaze was distant. Beauty's just a reminder. It doesn't last unless someone protects it. She met his eyes. Then we protect it. They stood together in the sunlight, the weight of the chain now a quiet presence rather than a shackle. The wind lifted Eric's cloak, revealing the faint scar on his hand, catching the light like a promise. Somewhere far away, a deep hum resonated again, so faint it might have been imagined. Eric knew better. The journey wasn't over, but for now, there was peace.